This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by my patrons, readers, and listeners. If you'd like to learn how to support this podcast, visit lexstarwalker.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 48 of Lex Out Loud, writing science fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. This show is a chronicle of my journey as a science fiction novelist. Hello and welcome back to the show, everyone. So great to be back for another episode. Hope everyone had a great week since last time. So the last episode, I started talking about beginning to edit the book I just finished writing that I talked all about writing that in season 2 of the show. So today I'm going to kind of follow that same thread and talk a bit about alpha readers and beta readers. So I think that the terms alpha reader and beta reader are fairly standardized among writers. And I always, without hearing someone really define the difference between the two, I always figured that alpha readers are the first people to see a draft and give you feedback on it. And then beta readers are people who see a later draft than what the alpha readers do. Just like if you have alpha testing and beta testing for a video game or software, same kind of idea, right? Figured that's probably the way it works. And that is true. That is basically how it works. But there's a little bit more to it than that as far as what is an alpha reader versus what is a beta reader. So as much as it often seems like we're all on the same page with terms like these, as soon as you think that you've got things all figured out, you'll encounter a writer who uses the same terms in a slightly different way, or maybe uses some other terms you've never heard of, and it kind of throws you a curveball and makes you wonder if you really understand things as well as you thought you did. So I use the terms alpha readers, beta readers. That's what I most often hear used by other writers. And for a long time, that's kind of the only terms I ever heard. But I have occasionally here and there heard other terms. You'll hear terms like first readers or critique partners and other terms like that. So, at the end of the day, who knows what a given term means to a given writer? Just the nature of language. So often we learn new terms through context, through hearing other people use those terms, and we make our own inferences about what those mean based on how that person uses them. Like I just discussed, kind of my initial understanding of alpha and beta readers, that's how I came to that. So most often that's how we learn new terms in our language. We don't so often just go and look up a dictionary definition. So sometimes, different people will have very different ideas about what the same term means. So sometimes it can be a little confusing and unclear what someone means when they use these various terms. So I thought it would be an interesting and fun discussion for the show to talk about at least what I mean, and I think what most writers mean when they use the term alpha reader and beta reader, and what the difference is between the two. So I've talked quite a bit on this show about alpha readers and beta readers and writing groups. Don't know if I've so much defined what those terms mean, at least to me. So this might be a little late in coming, but better late than never. So, we're writers, right? So words are important. Every once in a while, when you discuss something like that, you'll see someone that we'll try to make the case that it doesn't matter, that words aren't important. But as writers, surely we all understand and can agree that yes, words are very important. And the right word is important, and knowing exactly what a word means and making sure you're saying what you think you're saying is pretty important for writers and for everyone, really, but especially for writers. So it's kind of interesting when I was thinking about this and preparing for this discussion today, I started thinking about how when I wrote my last novel, my first novel, Dawn of Endless Night, which was an urban fantasy. I now write science fiction, but the first one was urban fantasy. I let my wife read the first draft as I was writing it. So, a given day I'd write a chapter or two or whatever, the first draft, and I'd be like, hey, read these, tell me what you think. So she was reading it as I was writing it, chapter by chapter. And, this was over 10 years ago. Time has passed. And this time I decided to wait to have her read it. I decided not to have her do that or ask her to read the first draft. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have her read the third draft, which is also going to be the draft that I will workshop with a writing group and also send out to other alpha readers. So I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but the other day I was editing the first draft and found myself really feeling very thankful that I didn't let her or anyone else read the first draft, because there are parts of it that aren't that great, parts of it that are really bad. And I'd be embarrassed for someone else to read that, even her, especially her. A maxim, I guess you could say, that you will often hear writers say is that first drafts are allowed to suck. And I think that's true. And I think that's really important for the writing process to accept and really internalize that your first draft is allowed to suck, and that's okay. But I think a key to being able to do that, being able to truly allow your first draft to suck, is to not allow other people to read it. Keep that first draft for you. If you let other people read it, then you're not going to be as inclined to let it suck. You're going to be consciously or subconsciously, as you're writing that first draft, thinking about this person or persons who are going to read it and not wanting them to read something that's going to embarrass you. So you're going to want to try to polish it as you go, or God forbid, go back and edit it after you finish writing a section of your first draft, which is not allowing it to suck. And it's getting into that dangerous territory of revising while you're writing. So, if you're allowing people to read your first draft, you're going to be tempted to edit it and to fix it, because people are going to read it. Personally, and I know a lot of writers out there will agree with me, a very important key element to finishing the first draft of a novel in a timely manner is to not do any kind of editing of it until it's finished. You write the first draft, you keep going, you don't stop until you finish the book, and then you edit after you take a break from it. Something Stephen King says in his book on writing that I really like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says something along the lines of, with the first draft, you're telling the story for yourself. And then when you revise it with the second draft, you're telling the story for someone else, for the reader. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And again, if you don't allow yourself that first draft and you don't allow it to just be for you, to get your idea of the story down in some form, if you're trying to write that first draft for someone else, then it's going to impede your progress. It's going to impede the flow of your creativity, and it's just going to slow you down. It's going to take a lot longer because you're going to be effectively writing and editing at the same time. Very much for me, a big part of getting through the first draft of a novel is being able to turn off my internal editor, that part of my mind that constantly wants to look over things and find mistakes and fix them. And that's very difficult for me because I am very much a perfectionist in everything I do, but especially when it comes to writing. And if I don't make a real effort to not do that, I'll spend more time editing than I will drafting. So the first draft is just for me. The second draft, that first edit, now I'm starting to think about, what other people might think about it. But at least the way I'm doing things now, no one else is actually going to see it until the third draft, which again is the one I will send out to the alpha readers. And even with that, I'm going to be very choosy about who I allow to see it. I won't just let anyone read the third draft. It's still going to be fairly rough, most likely, lacking in polish in a lot of places, or even all the places. There may not be any polish. So it's not helpful to show something like that to someone who's not going to appreciate the stage of the process the work is in. So the first distinction about alpha readers, as in who are your alpha readers and what makes an alpha reader different than a beta reader, is it's best for the alpha readers to be other writers. And that's a big part of the reason why, is because another writer who has also written novels can understand the difference between the first draft, the second draft, the third draft, the fourth draft, and so on. And they can understand and appreciate where in the process you are, where in the process this manuscript is, and can give feedback that's appropriate to that stage of the process. Also, of course, you only want to have alpha readers who not only are other writers, but are people that you trust. A reader who isn't themselves a writer and also isn't a novelist and someone who's finished at least one novel may not understand the nuances of the process and the different stages of the process. They may not understand that this draft that you've given them is not perfect, that it's not supposed to be perfect, that you don't think that it is perfect. They may end up giving you feedback that you don't care about at this stage in the process and that isn't helpful right now. And also they may not give you the feedback that you actually want or need. So I want to note here that all these things can still go wrong with other writers. Just because your alpha reader is a fellow writer doesn't mean that all this is going to go according to plan or everything's going to go smoothly. It doesn't mean that they necessarily understand these things. Some people have written a novel, have maybe written numerous novels, but they've never been critiqued by anyone, or they've never themselves critiqued anyone, or they've never participated in critiques with someone that actually knows what they're doing. They may not really understand this themselves. So just because someone's a fellow writer doesn't guarantee that all these things are going to go right. But it is far more likely than someone who's just someone who reads books, but they don't themselves write books. So although, choosing another writer for an alpha reader doesn't guarantee that you'll get good feedback and the appropriate feedback, it does, I think, increase your odds quite a bit. So yes, alpha readers are the first people to look at your book and to give you feedback on it. But usually for most of us, alpha readers are going to be other writers. With this early of a draft, in my case, the third draft, we want another writer looking at it and giving feedback because another writer hopefully speaks the same language, speaks the language of writing, and understands the process the same way that we do. Another writer will hopefully be able to give you exactly the type and the quality of feedback you're asking for while not giving you feedback you're not asking for. Because again, they understand the process because they do it themselves. So what kind of feedback am I talking about here? What kind of feedback am I looking for from alpha readers? So what I'm looking for is big picture stuff. I want my alpha readers to answer questions like, does the plot make sense? Do the characters make sense? Do you buy what the characters say and do? Does it seem realistic to you? Are the characters believable as far as how they think, how they behave, how they talk? Are you sympathetic to the protagonists, which is to say, not necessarily do you like the protagonist. I mean, it's usually seen as a good thing that the reader likes the protagonist, but being sympathetic means more that the reader is rooting for the protagonist. They want the protagonist to succeed. So you could have a protagonist that by design is not a very likable person, and maybe part of their arc through the story is they will become a more likable person, or maybe not. But even if they're not someone that the reader would personally like if they met this person in real life, you want them to be rooting for the main character. You want them to care whether the protagonist succeeds or fails at whatever they're trying to do. Because if the reader doesn't care if your protagonist succeeds or fails, then they don't care about the book. They don't care about the story. And, that's not good. If they even finish the thing, they're not going to care. And I'm sure we've all been there, reading a book or watching a movie or a TV show where we just don't care about the protagonist. We don't care if they succeed or fail. And the story doesn't mean anything to us. So we don't want that. We want the opposite. We want the reader to care about our protagonist and whether or not they succeed at what they're trying to do. Other questions that I want alpha readers to answer are things like, do you find the story interesting? Do you find the setting interesting? How is the pacing? Is it too slow? Is it too fast? Are certain parts too slow? Other parts too fast? Is it just right? Do you ever get bored? Are there points in the story where you're bored and you don't want to read it anymore? Things like that. So those are the kind of questions I'm looking to answer, or I'm looking for the alpha readers to answer. If you're an alpha reader giving me feedback on my book, if there's a character that you don't like, especially if it's one of the point of view characters, but really any of the main characters, and you don't like them, I want to know. And also, of course, I want to know why. And that's another important thing about feedback, especially from alpha readers, and why, again, hopefully other writers will be good at this, is, it's not just enough to know what isn't working or what they don't like or what they find boring, but it's also important to get as many specifics as you can. Not how they think you should fix it, because that's your job. You don't want that, but specifics about why they think they don't like this character. What is it the character said or did that made them not like them? Or why do they think they're bored in this part of the story? Things like that. So the more specific they can get, the better. If you're an alpha reader and something happens in the story that you don't find believable, I want to know about that. If you feel a character is misrepresented, whether due to their culture, their gender, their sexual preference, or anything like that, I want to know. Other things I'm interested in are things like continuity errors, logic errors, insufficient research. For instance, you tell me that guns don't work the way I have them working, or horses don't work the way I have them working. Those aren't the correct symptoms for someone in shock. Things like that. These kinds of big picture things, things that really kick you out of the story. That's what I'm most concerned about when it comes to alpha feedback. So what are things that I don't care about at this stage? So the things I really don't care about right now are more nitpicky things that will be addressed in later drafts. Things like spelling errors, punctuation errors, etc. I mean, this is only the third draft. There are going to be multiple drafts after this to fix all that kind of nitpicky stuff. Right now, I want to make sure that the characters and the plot are solid, that they're believable, and that they're engaging, that you're enjoying the story and you're interested in what happens next. I want the characters that are supposed to be sympathetic to actually be sympathetic. if there's a character that you're supposed to not like or hate, then I want you to hate them at this point. So right now, for instance, I'm not so much concerned with the voice. I mean, if the character has a distinct voice that you enjoy, I mean, that's fantastic at this point. But if they don't, or if the voice isn't consistent through the book, again, that's the kind of thing that will be addressed later. I'm not so much worried about that right now. So members of your writing group, if you're in a writing group, are also alpha readers, or at least that's how I think of them. Again, they're other writers, and you're going to be giving them an earlier draft to give you feedback on. So if you are in a writing group, then the members of your writing group may be all of the alpha readers you have. Or you may, in addition to the writing group, also give your manuscript to additional alpha readers that you deal with on a one-on-one basis. And personally, this is what I'm really hoping to do. If I can make the dream a reality, then I will have a decent-sized writing group that will look over my third draft and give me feedback. And I will also, in addition to that, have some alpha readers that I deal with on a one-to-one basis. And, there's a couple of reasons for that I can think of right now. The first is just to have more alpha readers. Up to a certain point, the more alpha readers, the better. The more feedback you can get, the better. Now, there is a limit to how much feedback you can really deal with. And there comes a point of diminishing returns, I think, where you have so many people giving you feedback that it's more trouble than it's worth, because now there's so much feedback from so many different people. It gets harder and harder to internalize all that and decide what you're going to use, what you're not. And it just takes more time. It takes more time to think about the feedback from 20 people than it does to think about feedback from 10 people. So that's, one thing to think about. But another reason that I would like to have alpha readers above and beyond my writing group is, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, a writing group is a group. So you're going to run into groupthink, and this can happen where, you're with your writing group, you're having your meeting, and people are going around critiquing the last chapter you gave them or something. And one of the people points out something that they notice in your chapter. And this may be something that no one else would have ever noticed, but because this person pointed it out, now everybody's thinking about that, and now they're all noticing it. So sometimes in a writing group, things can get kind of blown out of proportion, where you have all these people taking issue with something. And maybe if they would have all read it on their own and not given you feedback in a group setting, maybe none of them, other than the first one, would have noticed that thing. So that's why it can be nice to, in addition to your writing group, have some other alpha readers that are not associated with the writing group and aren't hearing that feedback that other people are getting, because then you are pretty much just getting that one person's feedback, and it's not being influenced by other people who are reading that and giving their feedback. So that can be really useful, especially maybe you have a situation like that where someone in your writing group notices something and takes issue with something in your manuscript that you think is really just something only this particular person would notice, and most people wouldn't notice it. But now everybody in the writing group is noticing it, and you're not sure, is this a big deal or not? Well, then you can look at your other alpha readers that aren't affiliated with the writing group. And if none of them notice that thing, then you can feel pretty safe thinking, okay, this was just something this one person noticed and not something I need to worry about. Where if, on the other hand, your independent alpha readers do notice the same thing, then you can feel more confident saying, okay, this is something I need to address. This is something that a lot of readers are going to notice, and it wasn't just this one person influencing the group. All right, so that's alpha readers. So in my case, the alpha readers are getting the third draft, is what I'm thinking now. This is all subject to change. I may, after doing the third draft, decide I want to do another revision on my own before I I give it to the alpha readers. But at least for now, that's what I'm planning. So that's alpha readers. So now let's talk about beta readers and what's the deal with the beta readers? How do they differ from the alpha readers? Well, obviously they're going second. They're not the first people to look at it. They're the second group of people to look at it. So they're going to look at a later draft. So you're going to get your feedback from your alpha readers and make whatever changes you decide to make based on that. And then you might do some more revisions after that. And then your beta readers will take a look at it. And there is a huge wasp in here. I'm going to go deal with that. All right. It is spring. All the critters are coming alive. I had actually, it wasn't a wasp. It was a yellow jacket in my office here. And I thought I'd deal with him. All right. Where were we? Beta readers. So your beta readers are, getting a draft where you've already hopefully addressed and fixed all the big picture problems that the alpha readers helped you find. So for me right now, based on kind of how I'm planning to do things right now, my beta readers will be getting the 5th draft. And I think I will, in a future episode, I'll go into more detail about the editing process and what all these different drafts will be like. But that would be too much to do today in addition to all this stuff. So the beta readers will get the 5th draft. And again, while the alpha readers are usually and ideally other writers, the beta readers don't need to be. And in fact, I think it's better if they're not, in my opinion. If this book I'm writing is going to be published with a big publisher, then the vast majority of the people who end up reading it will not be other writers. So although other writers can help me spot and identify problems that your average reader, wouldn't be able to help me with, and it's not so much a thing that they wouldn't know there was a problem. They probably would. Someone who's well-read would probably spot the same problems that the alpha readers would. They just may not be as good at communicating what exactly the problem is and why that problem is a problem. That's where having, someone who's another writer and speaks the language and knows more about the process can be helpful, because they can be better able to communicate to you exactly what's going on, why it's a problem, and things like that. Where, with a reader, you may just get something like, something in this scene seems off to me, or I don't really like this character, but I can't tell you why, things like that. But I think it is important to get that kind of feedback, because again, most of the people reading my book are not going to be other writers. They're going to be just people who read books. So I really want to know what those people think. Also, the nice thing about, the alpha beta system is, the alpha readers are getting an earlier draft where there are going to be more problems, and they're going to be more kind of big picture problems, and where you're asking them to ignore the more nitpicky stuff that you don't care about right now, which is great things for fellow writers to help you with. So then you go through that process, and now when you come to your beta readers who are not writers, you are giving them a much cleaner draft where there aren't going to be those big problems, or at least not nearly as much of them, that might confuse them or kick them out of the story or whatever. So, it's one thing for a fellow writer to help you with something that's really rough, but that can be a lot more difficult for just someone who's just an avid reader. So it's a lot better that we can give them this, this later draft that's much more polished, much more refined, and has a lot of the big problems already dealt with, so that we can get a more honest impression of just what they kind of think of it overall. And is there anything still in there that's tripping them up or confusing them, or that they don't like, things like that. So, your beta readers, a lot of times they're going to be, of course, people who read. That's what you want. People who read, preferably read quite a bit. and likely people who not only read a lot, but who also read whatever genre your book is quite a bit. These are the ideal people that I want for beta readers. So I think there are some considerations here just based on how many beta readers you're going to have. If you're just going to have a few beta readers, then you probably mostly want to focus on readers who read the genre you're writing. So for me, I'm writing science fiction. So if I'm only going to have, a few beta readers, then I want most or all of those to be people who actually read and enjoy science fiction, because that's the feedback that's going to be most important and helpful to me is what do readers of science fiction think of this? If you're, on the other hand, going to have more beta readers, then you might want more of a spread as far as the types of books that your beta readers normally read. So, for example, for myself right now, I would love to have quite a few beta readers, as many as possible, really, as long as the number doesn't get so large that it's hard to manage all the feedback, kind of like I talked about before. I recently saw a thing on YouTube, an interview with Patrick Rothfuss, where he said he has something like over 100 beta readers. And I mean, good on him if that's what works for him. But to me, that sounds insane. I would never want to do that. I can't imagine trying to internalize feedback from over 100 people. Unless I was going to do some kind of statistical analysis with that. I mean, I could see that being maybe useful, but actually trying to go through detailed feedback from over 100 people and decide what I'm going to use, what I'm not, what's useful, what's not. That just sounds like a nightmare to me and a huge, huge time sink. Like that would take so much time to deal with. So I don't want that many. I don't want 100 or more. But ideally, most of my beta readers will be people who enjoy sci-fi and read a lot of it. Those are the opinions I'm most interested in. If I have, a good amount of beta readers, I want the majority of people to be that, people who read and enjoy sci-fi. Again, if I only have a few beta readers, then I probably want them all to be people who enjoy and read sci-fi. But if I can really just wish on a star here, and if I could have whatever I wanted, I would have a decent number of beta readers. Most of them would read and enjoy sci-fi. Some of those beta readers who read and enjoy sci-fi would also especially be into mundane science fiction specifically, which is what my book is. So really drilling down to the specific subgenre of science fiction that I'm trying to do. So, if I could have enough beta readers where I could have, maybe 2 or 3 that specifically read a lot of mundane science fiction, that would be really useful. Because then I could get that point of view from someone who reads a lot of that, because that's what I'm trying to do. How does this compare to other mundane science fiction you've read, especially if you're well read in that subgenre? But again, while I'm dreaming, if I could have this fairly large pool of beta readers, again, not 100 people, but I don't know, maybe 20 or something. I would also, which that might even be too many. I'm not sure. It seems like a lot, but anyway, let's say 10 or more. I would also, in addition to having, a good number who love sci-fi and a few who specifically love mundane science fiction, if I had enough of them, it would be great to also have a few at least, or just a few, not at least, just a few, have a few who don't read science fiction all the time. Maybe, they don't read it very much, or maybe even I have 1 or 2 who don't read science fiction at all. Now, this may not be a thing for you with what you're doing. You may not really care about feedback from people who don't read the genre you're writing normally. But I would actually care about this and would like to have this if I had enough beta readers to make it feasible. Because again, the most important thing is to get the feedback from science fiction readers. After that would be getting feedback from some who specifically read mundane science fiction. But, the icing on the cake, if I had enough of them, would be to get some feedback from some people that don't read science fiction much or even don't read it at all. So I'm thinking here, someone who doesn't read science fiction but has an open mind is not going to just hate the book all the way through because it's science fiction, but someone who is like, well, I don't read science fiction normally, but I'm willing to give it a try, and if it's a good story, I can get into it no matter what the genre is. Like that kind of reader. And the reason that would be interesting to me is because I would really love my book to have appeal beyond just fans of science fiction. And so that would give me a little glimpse into that possibility. What does someone who doesn't read science fiction but has an open mind to it think of this? Is this a book they can enjoy? Because that would be really great if my book could be something that even people who aren't normally science fiction readers would read and enjoy. So like I mentioned before, a beta reader, someone who's not a fellow writer, isn't going to necessarily give you the same depth of feedback that another writer could or would, but they can give you a good feel and a good idea of what a reader will think of the book. And this can be really valuable. There might be things in my book that other writers will love, but the average science fiction reader will hate. And if that's the case, I want to know, because again, most of my potential readers are not themselves writers. So, the writers are great for that high level feedback and that in-depth feedback, but ultimately they're not the ones I really want to please. I want to please the average reader. Also, again, hopefully by this point in this process, you're at a later draft and you've worked out all the major problems anyway. So you don't need that super focused, high level feedback that you get from your alpha readers, because that stuff's already been dealt with. Of course, you can always do what you want and you should and make this work for you, whatever works for you. There are no rules here. There's no authority on high who's going to make you do this in a certain way. Whatever works for you, do it. These are just my thoughts and what I think will work for me. And sometimes you break these rules or these guidelines. For instance, for me, one of my alpha readers is my wife. And she's not a writer. So you might wonder, well, why is she an alpha reader? It seems like she'd be better suited as a beta reader. She does read a lot. And although science fiction isn't the genre she reads the most, she does read it. She's open to it. And so, yeah, she sounds like an ideal beta reader, right? So why is she an alpha reader? Well, there are also other things to consider. So first, I want her to read it. It's really that simple. And I'm eager to hear what she thinks about it. I also think she's eager to read it. I mean, she's heard me talking about it for, going on 2 years now. So I'm sure she's curious and would like to read it. And honestly, it's hard enough for me making her wait until the third draft and hearing what she thinks until the third draft. So I don't want to make her or me wait until the fifth draft, which is when the beta readers are going to get it. Second, I've talked with her about the book a lot while I was planning it, also as I've been writing it, and also as I've been editing. Oh my God, editing it. Oh my God. Also, as I've been revising it. There we go. So she has a lot of, quote, inside information about the book that, your average reader wouldn't have, or even an alpha reader, or even another writer. Like, she knows a lot of stuff about the book that other people won't when they go to read it. So in my mind, that puts her more at the level of a fellow writer reading it than an average reader because of all that kind of stuff she already knows about it before she even reads it. So just as another writer would notice things in a book that the average reader won't, so also would my wife notice things in this book that the average reader won't, because she already knows a bit going into it. And the third reason, and probably honestly the most important, is she's my ideal reader. So this is a term I stole from Stephen King. And he says that he thinks, when you're writing a book, you're really writing it for one person, usually a specific, distinct person. And I think that's true. When you think about it, it's not really possible to write a book for a demographic. You can't really guess or know what a population of people, a population of strangers, of people you don't know, are going to think about X, Y, or Z in your book. But you can guess what one person you know really well will think of it, right? So I think that's what a lot of us do, is whether we realize it or not, whether it's more subconscious or conscious, when we're writing, we do have this ideal reader in mind, and we're asking ourselves, will this person find this funny? Will this person find this scary? Will this person find this interesting? Maybe for some of us, the ideal reader is ourself. But I think, at least those of us that want to write for a career, I think, for the most part, we're not writing for ourselves. We're writing for other people. And just a fundamental part of that is to imagine the reader. And again, you can't really imagine an unknown population or demographic of people, but you can imagine someone that you know really well. So I'm not going to say this is a universal. I doubt there are many, if any, universals, but I'll bet it's pretty common that people have an ideal reader, even if they haven't really thought about it or haven't, really pointed out for themselves who that person is. I think a lot of us, if we think about it, will realize, oh yeah, I am kind of thinking of so-and-so when I write and what they would think of it. So for me, that's my wife. And in my case, it is a conscious thing. I am aware of this. And so in my mind, if she likes it, I've succeeded as far as that goes. So I really want her feedback as early in the process as possible. If she likes my main character, then I'm probably doing all right with my main character. If she thinks the part that's supposed to be funny is funny, then it's probably funny. If she thinks the part that's supposed to be scary is scary, then it's probably scary. Also, I'm just always going to get more and better feedback from her than I will from most other people, even though she isn't a writer, because I live with her and I see her and talk to her every day. And also, she is an artist. She's a visual artist. And it's amazing to me how much of the creative process is similar or even the same between different arts, like drawing and painting, like what she does, writing, music. A lot of it is the same, and a lot of it translates pretty well. So there you go. That's how I approach alpha readers and beta readers. That's what those terms mean specifically to me. Again, different writers may have some different ideas. They might be slightly different. They might be very different. I've definitely heard writers who only have one. They don't have alpha readers and beta readers. They only have one group. So it seems like, at least in my experience, most of those writers I've encountered will call them beta readers for whatever reason. But some of them will call them alpha readers, or they'll call them first readers or something different. So yeah, and I should give credit where credit is due. I have done so much research into the craft of writing. I've assimilated so much from so many different places that it's often really hard to say what comes from where. But I do think that a lot of my understanding of alpha readers and beta readers and the difference between the two does come a lot from Brandon Sanderson, specifically from his podcast, Writing Excuses, which he's not the only one on the podcast. And also, he has lectures. He teaches a university course on creative writing in science fiction and fantasy. at some university in Utah, I believe. I can't remember the university. But anyway, he teaches a college level course in this stuff. And he has some of his lectures on his YouTube channel. And I know I've watched those. But, and I know they've talked about this a lot in the earlier seasons of Writing Excuses. But Brandon is really, really good at understanding his own process and explaining it to other people. He's an excellent teacher when it comes to writing. So I'm willing to bet that a lot of this does come from him, because he's definitely the person that I've heard go into the most detail on this topic. And I am pretty sure that most of my concepts of, what are alpha readers, what are beta readers, what are the differences, how are they used, have come directly from him. So yeah, if you want to go deeper into this or any writing topic, I highly recommend you check him out. And, Brandon is a very, we all have our own styles. So he has a very distinctive style as far as how he approaches writing. I've talked before about how I don't really buy into the discovery writer planner dichotomy. I don't think that's actually a real thing. I more see those as two different tool sets, and we all use various tools from both of those sets in different ways. But that said, he is someone who uses a lot of the outlining / planning tool set. So if you're more a fan of the discovery writing tool set, his style may not jive with yours exactly the way he approaches things. But even if that's the case, I still think you would benefit a lot from hearing what he has to say, because like I said, he's just really good at understanding his own process and how he does what he does and why he does what he does. And he's very good at explaining that. And a lot of the writers aren't. A lot of writers can't really tell you how they do what they do or why they do the things they do. Or they're not good at explaining it. Maybe they understand it within themselves, but they can't really explain it. But a lot of writers, it's very, it's instinct. They're doing what they're doing by instinct, and they can't really explain it to themselves or anyone else how they're doing what they're doing. So it's kind of, in a way, rare to find a writer who is a good writer and who can not only understand what they're doing, but explain it and teach it to other people. And so Brandon really is one of those rare people. And like I said, even if your style is very different from his, I think you will learn a lot from hearing what he has to say. So I would highly recommend his podcast, Writing Excuses. You can find that at writingexcuses.com. I listened to that. I started listening to that from the very beginning. I would really recommend, if you're new to it, I would really recommend going to the very beginning, starting with the first episode, season 1. It takes a little more doing, because if you go to, like your podcast app and subscribe to the podcast, they've put out so many podcasts. I mean, that show's been going, gosh, it's got to be getting close to 20 years now. It's been a long time. So they put out a lot of episodes. And so the feed in whatever app you use is only going to have the most, 100 or so most recent episodes. It's not going to go anywhere near all the way back to season 1. So if you want to take my advice, and if you want to start at the beginning, which I really recommend you do, you're going to need to go to the website, writingexcuses.com, and go into the archive and either listen to the episodes there or download them from there. But it's definitely worth the trouble to do that. And the reason that I recommend the earlier episodes is, like I said, they've been definitely more than 10 years. I think it's like, I don't know what season they're on, but I think it's close to like 15 years maybe they've been doing this. So there's only so many topics to talk about, right? So in the hundreds and hundreds of episodes they've done, they have, circled back to certain topics again and again. And just in my opinion, from my experience of the show, I found the most benefit from the earlier episodes, the first time they addressed those topics. So I would really recommend starting at the beginning and going from there. And then you will probably, like I did, get to a point where you kind of feel like you've gotten what you're going to get from it. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. I haven't heard the most recent episodes, because again, to me, it did seem like they were starting to, go over, the same topics again. And also now they have a lot of different writers on there that I don't know, that are newer, younger writers. And yeah, I just, I'd kind of gotten, I felt what I was going to get from it from the earlier episodes. So I'm not saying that the newer episodes aren't good. I'm sure they're fine. But yeah, those early episodes were really, really useful to me. And then also check out his channel on YouTube. Like I said, he's got a whole series of lectures, from his course that he teaches on there. And he goes into things like world building and character building and, the business of writing, some stuff about finding agents and dealing with publishers and editors and all that kind of stuff. So, really great resource. Highly recommend you check all that stuff out. And I tell you what, I will put some links in the show notes, so you don't have to type into your address bar if you don't want to. I'll put a link to their website in there, also to Brandon's YouTube channel. And there's also, now that I think about it, there's another YouTube channel with some older videos, that I believe, was a channel that one of his previous students put together. It's a lot of it's redundant because these are kind of the same lecture series from previous years, but I've watched all of them. I think there's 3 or 4. There's the same lecture series from 3 or 4 different years between the 2 YouTube channels, and I've listened to all of them. And he does cover some slightly different topics in the different years. So if you're really getting a lot out of it, like I did, you might want to check out the previous year's lectures as well on the other channel. And I'll link that one in the show notes as well too at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. Oh, one last thing. I don't know if I really need to say this or if I should say this, but I will say this, just for the record. I am not affiliated with Brandon Sanderson in any way. I don't get anything for promoting him or what he does or anything like that. I have listened to a lot of podcasts on writing. I've read a lot of blogs. I've read a lot of books on the topic, and there's a lot of stuff out there that's not great. Even a lot of stuff that you will often hear recommended as, oh, you should read this book or you should listen to this podcast. I have found to not be that great, to not be that helpful, to just be telling you really obvious stuff that you probably already know. The truly useful resources I have found for better learning the craft of writing are pretty few and far between, honestly. So that's what I talk about on this show. So when I talk about writing excuses and Brandon's lectures or Stephen King's book on writing, those are among those few resources I have found in, I think, about 20 years now of looking, that have been extremely helpful to me and very educational and aren't just saying the obvious things that every book out there on writing says. So that's why I don't get any kind of kickback or anything from these guys. I mean, these are highly successful writers that don't care about me or what I'm doing anyway. They don't need that. They don't need my promotion to get where they want to go. So it's just an honest, this is what's helped me. This is what I found really valuable. And if you want to learn more, this is what I think you should check out. So that's all I have to say about that. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-465-5391. Also, please join our community on Discord. It's a great way to not only get in touch with me, but other writers and listeners of the show. And join us on Discord in our server. You can find a link to that as well as all those other things in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. Finally, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if this has been at all helpful to you and you'd like to help me out and help keep the show going, you can support the show by becoming a patron. There are also a lot of other ways you can help me out that some of them don't even cost anything. You can find all that stuff at lexstarwalker.com/support. So that's going to wrap it up for this week for Lex Out Loud. Hope you're having as much fun as I am. Hope you're making progress on whatever you're working on. And if you are working on something, let us know in the Discord. It'd be great to hear what people are doing out there. And I will be back soon with another episode. And until then, keep writing.